Welcome back, guys. Here is the section for Experimental 2. Today we're going to talk about within subject designs, because we talked a little bit about between subject designs as well as the fundamental issues and elements of the experimental design. Just a little bit recap. So if you're running an experiment, you definitely need the following three things. The first one is at least one manipulated IV. Second is the random assignment of participants to different groups in your experiment. And lastly, you definitely need a dependent variable measure. So we talk about between subject group design. Just trying to remind you, there are four basic elements, which some of them are optional, some of them are must have. So you can have pre-test and post-test, and you must have a treatment group and a control group. So in the between subject design, basically participants are going to be assigned to only one of the few treatment/control conditions in your experiment, and each participant only used once. In the within subject design, all participants will be used multiple times. That means all the participants will be exposed to all different conditions in the experiment. For example, if you have a treatment control condition, all participants will be exposed to both treatment and the control condition in the within subject design. So what this type of design are, what are things that we should pay attention to? Well, let's just dive into those issues. Firstly, just a brief overview of within subject designs. That means, again, every single participant is subject to every treatment, including the control conditions, if you have them. Within subject design, it must have the following three things. You have controlled order of the different treatment control conditions. This is because you can have treatment first, or the treatment goes second. You can have control first, or have the control go second, right? So there are different orders in terms of presenting the different levels of treatments. The second, you need at least one manipulated IV. This is also applied to all kinds of experimental designs. Manipulation is definitely a requirement. And next, you definitely need at least two groups. So if you just have one group, that won't be able to give you the power to control for the order of different treatment control conditions, right? So you have at least two types of orders. If you have two conditions, you have control, treatment, control. So you can have two groups, with one group being giving participant treatment first, as giving participant control second, and the second group be like giving participants control condition first, then comes with the treatment condition. So here is a very basic design diagram for the post-test, only designed for the within subject designs. So this seems to be very rudimentary, and actually I don't recommend doing this, but this is just give you a kind of flavor about a post-test only within subject design would be. So here you can see that we have a sample participants, and all of them, right? All of them. Remember, it's within subject design. They will all be received both treatment 1 and treatment 2. It could be a control condition here. So you give them a treatment, measure their DV, wait a little bit, give them another treatment, and measure their DV again. For example, you want to study the effectiveness of caffeine drink versus decaf drinks on anxiety. Your hypothesis will be when people drink caffeine drinks, they might be more anxious compared to people who drink decaf coffee or teas or any type of drinks. So to test these hypotheses, what you want to do, you just have a participants, firstly, everybody drink the decaf drink first, and then measure their anxiety. And have participants wait for a little bit and give them a caffeine drink and measure their anxiety again. So this is how the post-test only within subject design would be like. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about pre-test, post-test design. Basically, you just add one pre-test before participants go to the experiment. So before the participant drink the decaf drinks, you measure their baseline level of anxiety. And after drinking decaf coffee or teas, you measure their anxiety again. And after that, you give them a caffeine drink and measure the anxiety again. So we have three measures 2 post-tests and 1 pre-test. Once again, X means the treatment, O means observation or different type of test. These are the same symbols that we use to describe the between subject design as well. So as you can see, if your hypothesis that caffeine drink will really increase anxiety relative to the decaf drink, you probably will see no change in anxiety between the pre-test and the post-test after the first treatment of decaf drinks. However, you probably will see an increase in the anxiety compared to the post-test after the decaf drink and the pre-test. So that means O2 would be larger than O1 and O. So these are basically what the pre-test, post-designs are. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the potential problems associated with the breathing subject designs that we just talked about. So remember that we only have one order of the presentation of all the treatment conditions. So let's go back for a little bit. So you can see this study, we only have all participants have the decaf coffee first and then caffeine coffee, right? But after that, you don't have like participant drinking caffeine drink first and decaf coffee second. So you didn't really look at or control for the order of presenting the treatments, that is caffeine drinks and decaf drinks. So there could be an order effect, which means the effect of experimental conditions that might influence the scores on the dependent measurement. So you might, for example, want to place treatment first, then control condition, or have control/placebo condition first, then treatment condition. So these are just kind of different possibility of orders. And for example, if you have participants, let's say, drink coffee first and then drink a decaf coffee, the coffee's effect might change because they drink coffee and then participant will be more anxious, theoretically speaking, and even if they drink the decaf coffee, they might also be very highly anxious. However, if you have participants that drink decaf coffee, they might not report very much anxiety, and if they and after that, if they drink coffee with the regular coffee with caffeine in it, their anxiety might just skyrocket. So these two orders might actually give rise to different patterns of results. So we will have to be very careful of the effective order of the presenting experimental conditions on the measurement of measurement of the DVs. Next, there is what we call carryover effect, which means the effects from one condition might carry over to another condition. Let's say if the caffeine can really increase anxiety, right? It actually, if you drink coffee first, and if the coffee is very strong, so even if you just drink decaf coffee after that, you will also report very high anxiety. So, but if you just drink decaf coffee, let's say there is an effect for decaf coffee to reduce anxiety. If you drink the decaf coffee first, you probably will report low anxiety. But if after that, if you drink another cup of regular coffee with caffeine in it, your anxiety might not be boosted because the carried over effect of the decaf coffee that might suppress your feeling of anxiety. So, considering the ordering effect and carryover effect, you should definitely want to address these things because these are kind of additional confounding variables that's out there. We have effects not just from the IVs, that is in this scenario, the caffeine in the coffee. The effects might come from order that you present caffeine drinks versus decaf drinks, or the carryover effect from one kind of drink on the other kind of drink. So in order to rule these out, you need to control for or get rid of the order and carryover effect. So how can we do it? Well, firstly, you can have a counterbalancing. So basically it means that you should present all possible orders of the presentation and they should be included in experiment. This is the first step. So figure out what are all possible ways where you can present participants with different treatment, which treatment go first, which treatment go second, right? And you figure out all possible ways that participant can be exposed to in experiment, and then you do random assignment. You random assign participants to one of the possible orders. So that means you essentially, for all kinds of orders, you have the same type of participants in it, and this can help you to rule out the order effect and carryover effect. So counterbalancing is a very important thing you want to consider in running and within subject design. And some might argue, okay, why do you think this counterbalancing will be working? This is because if you put everything together, the potential order effect and the carryover effect will be cancel each other out, because you essentially have all kinds of possible orders presented to participants. Some order might increase, the effect of the IV on DV. Some orders might decrease the effect of IV on DV. And if you have all of them available to participants and participants all random assigned to each type of orders, these order effect or carryover effect can actually cancel each other out. So and at the end, you essentially remove the order effect and carryover effect from this analysis, so you don't have to worry about them again. So with counterbalancing, you will be freed from the worries of order and carryover effect. So here is one example that with order effect and carryover effect being taken care of. So here you can see this is a study about, again, whether caffeine can lead to increase in the anxiety. So you can present participants with decaf drinks first, and then comes with regular drinks with caffeine, or you can present participants with the caffeine drinks first and then and then decaf drinks. So in both conditions, participants from sample are just randomly assigned to order 1 and order 2, right? Both orders, because we've got 2 treatments, so you have a total of 2 types of orders. Then you randomly assign participant to one of these orders. Next, just give participants, let's see, we don't have pretest here, so this is a post-test only design where the anxiety measured only after participants receive their treatment. So you give participant decaf coffee, measure anxiety, and then give them caffeine drink, and then measure their anxiety again. So the order 2 will be reversed with regular caffeine drink first and decaf drinks the second. So this essentially can control for the order as well as the carryover effect. So this is a check question. I'll show you very briefly. Please pause here and work on yourself. The next slide will be the answer to it. So please take your time to complete it, and after that I'll move on to the next slides. I'm sorry, this is just a video. I cannot really make it kind of interactive, but if you have any questions about any of these materials, please, you can email me, message me on Canvas, or just leave a comment below this video. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to talk about the keys. See, this is what it looks like. Then we're going to talk about everything together. So we already finished within subject design. We will also talk about the between subject design in the previous video on experimental 1. So in the section of experimental 2, we're going to bring everything together, and actually we're going to end it with the topic. Let's start all the conversations on experiments. So we started talking about experiment by using the term internal validity, which means basically the extent to which that your experiment can establish the causality between your IVs and DVs. If your experiment does a really good job in detecting IV's effect on DV, then bingo, you got a really good internal validity. However, if your experiment designed very poorly, it might bring a lot of confounding variables, right? So within subject design, the confounding variable could be the order of the presentation of your treatments, right? That could be an additional confounding variable. For the between subject design, it could be the differences between the two groups. Even if you have random assignment, sometimes you cannot really control for the gender, the ages, right? all those participant variables. You probably want to use matched pair to really handle that. So those are the kind of way we need to combat confounding variable. But besides that, random assignment is a very, very basic and effective manner for us to deal with confounding variable as well. And if you want to run the experiment, you should always make sure your experiment is based upon random assignment of participants to different groups, whether it's a different groups with different conditions in the between subject design, or different groups with different orders of the presentation of the treatments / control conditions for the within subject group design. So here we are going to wrap everything together and introduce you other types of threats in addition to the confounding variables that we need to worry about in design of the experiment. So here they are. What are these threats, especially in terms of the design of experiment, that might harm your tunability? So first one I would like to talk about is history threats. Basically means any experience outside the experiment that might influence the responses. Let's say something going on outside experiment and all participants exposed to that, and those historical events might alternatively explain what is going on in your experiment. Secondly, maturation effect. Basically, participants just naturally mature on certain concepts. Let's say you are experimenting on people's intelligence, and when people get older, get more training, their intelligence might get higher. And this is actually very problematic, especially if you run a study in the long term, let's say in months or years, and you have to really account for the natural maturation processes of participants. The next couple of slides are threats related to the kind of measurement that you use in experiment. First one is test threats. Basically, participants might be familiar with the kinds of measurement you use in the study if they are giving the same measure over and over again. Let's say you give them the pre-test, post-test design for within or between subject design. So for those types of experiments, participants are at least given 2 tests, right? Pre-test and post-test. So once they are completed with pre-test, they actually got a chance to practice on it. And the second time they take the same test again, they might just become more familiar with what they did. They might, they might do it better, or they might just answer the same thing as before. In addition, they might, let's say, like I said, in terms of the post-test, you can have multiple post-tests. You can measure them repeatedly to see that, how things will change over time. If that's the case, then it can also increase likelihood for participants to practice, to have a practice effect. Because the more they practice, the more likely they're familiar with the test, the better the performance they might have. Again, if you want to see how participants, like if you design a program, want to see if those programs work on increasing participants' intelligence, you might measure the participants' intelligence, let's say for 5 times after the program to see how things change. But the problem is when if you use the same test over and over again, participants will get practiced. They can, without anything else, they can just, their performance just can go up very quickly because the practice itself. It's not might because of the program you give them or the maturation. It might be just because participants just practice, and they got better. So that's something you want to consider very carefully in the in designing repeated measure study with multiple post-tests. The fourth threat I want to talk a little bit about is instrumentation threat. It can also happen in in a study that runs in the long term, let's say for years, and because people might happen to use different types of measurement or materials to observe certain variables, and again, it's a problem in repeated measures. And people just make mistakes by themselves, or sometimes they just happen to develop the new measures, so they will replace the old one with the new one, and that can lead to sort of like change in terms of the measures. And that kind of change might not be necessarily attributed to the effects of the IVs. It might be just attributed to the change in the instrumentation and measure things. So definitely you want to use the same sort of instrumentation over time. But again, if you use the same instrumentation over time, you are likely to have testing threats, as people might get practiced a lot, so the performance can get better. So it's very hard to balance these things, but you definitely want to think very carefully when you design repeated measures. Maybe you can, let's say you can just increase the gap between participants finish the test and for the first time, and the test test for the second time. Or you can make participants do something else that might distract their attention, so they will forget about what's going on in test before, and then even if you give them the same test, they might not react in the same way. So that might decrease the effect of practice on performance of the tests. The fifth threat would be mortality threat. That basically means participants will drop out of the study unexpectedly. They might, and that does not mean they just died because of virus, something like that. They might just don't like your study, because remember the Bellman report, we need to respect participants' need for autonomy. They have the right to know about the study before they consent, and they have the right to leave or drop out from the study whenever they want, and they shouldn't be facing the consequences. So they happen. Some participants just don't like to do or be a participant anymore. They would just hate your study. They probably just want to go, get something food to eat. So if that's the case, you lose your participants. That even if you have random assignment or match pairs, that might hamper the notion that the groups you're comparing with are equal to each other. So that can actually add to additional concerns for the internal validity. So losing participant might be an issue as well. Lastly, we have a selection bias. Basically, participants might just want to choose their own experiment conditions. They just forget about random assignment, even though they were random assigned conditions. They just pretend, okay, yeah, I'll go that condition, but they just change their assignment and maybe, or they just trade with someone else to trade with other participants, so they can go to other conditions. So let's say if I'm running a study on effective meds on certain type of diseases, and as a participant I feel, okay, there's a new meds. Oh, I just feel very worried about it. I'm worried about the side effect. So I probably would just trade with another participant who is assigned to the placebo. I probably would pay him or her some money, so I'll be given the placebo instead of him or her. But again, without random assignment, you don't have equal groups to start with, so it's very hard for you to make then causal inferences regarding the effects of IV on DV. So again, you want to think about whether participants are really going to violate the random assignment, and by thinking ahead to prevent this from happening, such a participant will not know which group they're assigned to before they actually go to those groups. You might think this is very difficult to understand, and I'll give you one more example to fully explain all different types of threats to the internal validity in terms of design of experiments. So imagine you want to examine how different volumes of music, quiet versus loud music, influence memory using the within subject design. Okay, so basically you give participants like quiet music and loud music, or loud music first and quiet music second. After participants were exposed to the different type of music, you will measure their memory. So it's a very simple design, and you want to control the order of the presentation of quiet versus loud music very carefully, right? So there could be some threats. Let's say history. Depending on what type of memory you test, let's say you're testing someone's memory of important social events, and you're so lucky and there is something big things happening, like the stock market crash like 3 times in 10 days, and it will be probably hard for you to forget about that compared to other types of things going on in the society. So your memory will generally go up because of the historical events that are maybe really influential, so you won't be able to forget it, and you tend to exhibit very high level of memory. So history events, or let's say your team, or your favorite team won a game, and if the memory just task will ask you how well your favorite team is performing according to your memory, and you probably will score much higher in that situation compared to the cases where your favorite team didn't win a game or didn't have a game at all. So history events are something outside your experiment that can alternatively explain your effects of IV on the DV. Maturation. Okay, let's say you take part in a memory training program outside of this experiment, And when you are given experiment, it's kind of will probably take a few days for you to complete. And at the same time, you are taking the memory training test to increase the memory so you can prepare your finals better, right? So that sounds reasonable. But if the researchers were not aware of you are taking this memory training program, they probably would just attribute the increase or decrease in the memory to the type of music you were exposed to before your memory was tested. But in reality, the reason why you score higher or lower on the memory test was because the training you got from this memory training program. So maturation, that means that the measurement of the DV would just indicate your natural growth of certain psychological processes or constructs. It's not about whether experiment or manipulation have effect. It's more about your growth in terms of the maturation. And testing. Okay, since you have two types of music, right? After you are given each type of music, your memory will be measured once. So in total, you have two opportunities to test your memory. So your score can get better the second time because you essentially got practice in the first measurement of your memory. You kind of know what kind of question would come up, and the second time you take it, you probably will make less mistakes because of practice. So your score generally get better, and that can really influence the internal validity of this study about memory. Next, we're going to talk about instrumentation. Like I said in before, some people might use different tests mistakenly, intentionally, or unintentionally over the course of the experiment. So sometimes, let's say you use the person A's version of memory test, and after you receive the quiet music, for example. But if you were given loud music, and in that situation, your memory was tested using the person B's memory test, which was developed by another group of people, which have nothing to do with the first version of the memory test. Essentially, you're using different memory tests. So in that case, you probably have a lot of trouble understanding, the questions. So because those questions are so different than before, and that might influence your score on the memory test. However, those changes in the score in the memory test doesn't necessarily mean that the music had an effect. It might just mean that you were not familiar with those tests and you were using different tests, and the differences between those tests were able to account for the changes of the score in your memory. So then again, the change in the instrumentation might alternatively explain in a change of the level of your dependent variable measures. It's not because your IVs had an effect or not. It might just because the post tests are different from each other. So instrumentation is a big issue. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the mortality. Maybe you just decide to drop out from the study before it ends. You might just hate the loud music. You just feel like, oh, this study is crappy and terrible. It actually will damage my ears. So you probably will just drop out. And what if like many participants just think like you did? So they would complete just half of the experiment and then just drop out. They will never come back. And as experimenters, don't have enough data, and that also really make it very difficult for them to do data analysis. So any result they have will not be reflective of all the full sample. So the experiment might fail at the end of the day. Lastly, is about selection bias. So then again, you are probably just more interested in, let's say, the quiet music, and you're less interested in loud music. And so firstly, you probably will be random assigned to, let's say, the two orders of representing quiet versus loud music. You might be random assigned to a situation where quiet music was presented first, loud music the second, or the loud music goes first and loud music goes second. And you happen to know that, okay, you were going to receive the loud music condition first, and since you worry about your ears, you probably would just swap it with other participants who happen to like rock music, which can be very loud, and who really hate quiet music. So they would agree with you to to exchange the position, the order of all those or the order of those variables or manipulation treatments. So instead of going to the order where the loud music will be presented first, you ended up in a situation where the quiet music would be given to you in the first place. And this actually violated the random assignment, because according to random assignment, you shouldn't be in that group. You should just go to loud music first condition. So self-selection bias can be very harmful, and this thing can be combined with, let's say, mortality, with instrumentation, with testing, and as a kind of combo threats to the internal validity. And then again, the key things for an experiment to run perfectly is to make sure to take into account all types of threats to the internal validity as well as the confounding variables. And for between subject group design and within subject group for between subject design and within subject design, random assignment is a must. For the between subject design, you need random assign participants to different groups with different treatment / control conditions. With in the within subject design, you need to random assign participants to different orders of representations of treatment or control conditions. And that means counterbalancing. So random assignment are key to the experiment. Also, you definitely need a manipulated IV. And lastly, you definitely need dependent measures for your experiment to be a true experimentation. So this is all for the week of experimentation. Please let me know if you got any questions, and I'll show you some slides that wrap everything up. Before that, there are some check questions. Please pause here and take some time to finish them, and I'll show you the answers later. Here are the answers. So let's wrap everything up together. So internal validity, which means the extent to which the cause and effect relationship exists between the IV and DV. And here are the list of threats. You don't have to memorize the name of them, but at least you need to understand and appreciate the differences between them. You can try to compare each pairs. Let's say you can compare history versus maturation, compare testing threats with instrumentation threat. You can compare mortality threat with the selection bias. Next, we talked about our three elements of the true experimentation: manipulation, dependent variable, and most importantly, the random assignment. We also talked about the four elements in an experiment: pretest, treatment, control group, post-test. You can have pretest or not having it, but you definitely need the rest of the three. Pretest only design and post-test, pretest, post-test design are the two basic types of design. You can have, measure dependent variable only after manipulation, or you can measure dependent variable before and after manipulation, so you can get sense of what is going on before the experimentation starts. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about between subject design, where participants are only exposed to one level of the manipulated IV. And you can use matched pairs to match the participants, such that there will be equal groups assigned to different levels of the manipulation. However, for within subject design, it's the opposite, where participants are all going to be exposed to all levels of manipulated IV, and so you want to control for the order effect, carryover effect, and counterbalancing. So counterbalancing is one possible way, and is one effective way to protect participants from being exposed to the order effect or the carryover effect that might serve as confounding variables to your experiment, which might later harm your internal validity. So by counterbalancing, that means you need to present participants with all possible orders of presentations of the manipulations and control conditions, and assign participants randomly to only one order. So here is all the information you want to know in experimental design, and just don't hesitate to contact me. If you have any questions, you can send me an email, you can leave a message on the canvas, or you can leave a comment. below this video. And feel free to subscribe my channel. I will hopefully upload more videos on our future classes and through other if there's any other opportunities. Let's say if you're using Zoom, I can record all the Zoom class meetings. I'll download it and from the Zoom and upload it to YouTube channel so you can review the whatever we covered. And just again, if you have any question, just let me know. Thank you very much for your time. See you next time.